Thank you. Thanks so much for being here. We're just going to introduce ourselves. I'm Annie, and I help with the marketing and promotion for the expo.
Wonderful. Pleasure to meet you, Annie.
Pleasure to meet you.
And I'm Sue Greenwald, and I am the founder of the expo, and I am so grateful for your attendance. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Sue. I'm looking forward to it.
I wanted to introduce you to Salla Smarty Mendez, who's also on the call. And he'll introduce himself. He's a very unique person, and I thought you would be intrigued by the information that he'll bring to the table. But Smarty works with Pure Soul Science, and he has a website called holotech.biz. So you might want to check that out later. But you'll meet him in person as well at the expo. But I thought that he might have some feedback with what we're going to be talking about today. So you might want to just throw in a comment or two, John. So you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Salla Smarty Mendez. Everyone knows me as Smarty, and I'm pretty much the wild card dealing with Pure Soul Science. We're here to make changes, and there was significant changes made just about an hour ago. So expect a lot of changes.
Awesome.
My pleasure.
So with that, we'll start the meeting. We're very happy to have you. Dr. Salla is going to be at the Empowered Light Expo next week, September 29th and 30th in the greater Philadelphia area. And we just wanted to give our attendees a little taste of some information, talk a little bit about your background. And there's been a lot of stuff coming forward lately with Q, so we wanted to pick your brain with that as well. So, so happy to have you here today. Thank you. All right, so let's get started. Dr. Salla, I know that your background is in academia. You taught for many years, you're a professor, and we were wondering what made you get interested in ufology? How did you get into that field?
Well, for me, I really was basically red-pilled back in 2001. I mean, that's the best way of describing it. I was teaching international politics at the time at American University, and I saw the Disclosure Project press conference that Stephen Greer organized, and it just when I heard those people, when I heard the whistleblowers and the insiders talking about what they had experienced, I just knew that it was real. It was like, now they didn't have to present hard evidence. I just knew it. It was like something within me just said, these people are telling the truth. And it really just changed everything, because from that moment, I couldn't go back to doing what I was teaching previously. It was like, well, this stuff was real. I had to talk about it. I had to research it. And I had to write about it. And so that's really when my kind of journey down the rabbit hole began. And, the more I went down that rabbit hole, the more incredible discoveries I made, and continue to make these discoveries now with secret space programs and most recently with Q. That's just kind of like opened up a new layer of, what's down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, and just curious, how did your colleagues, your previous colleagues, react when you switched over? Because I know a lot of people, when they start to get into this field, things change in their normal day-to-day life.
Yeah, my colleagues weren't at all supportive. When I talked about Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project press conference, I actually invited Stephen Greer to American University to give a talk and booked the lecture hall and all of that. Mm-hmm. And it was made clear to me that this was not something that the university was going to support. So I had to cancel that. And then more things happened, and it was just becoming clearer and clearer that the university was not going to support me in any way, and just kind of really try and stifle me in discussing this in any connection to the university and the position I had with the university. So eventually the Washington Post did a feature story on my research, and that was it, because the university said, well, this is the final straw. We told you to kind of keep a low key on this, and here you are, giving the Washington Post do a feature story on you, you're out of here.
You're done.
That's the way it happened.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. And, it does take a certain kind of person to be able to come out and talk about this, because this is what happens. Oftentimes you're pushed out of your day-to-day life and things get turned upside down. So thank you for everything that you're doing. And you actually have a book that just came out, which is what your presentations are going to be based on. The Hidden History of Antarctica, Corporate Foundations of the Secret Space Programs. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about, I know that the book deals with the Nazi connection, and it goes in depth into the bases that were established in Queen Maudland. We were wondering, are those bases still there? How does that look like now from, going back from so many years ago when it first started?
Right. Well, basically, what the book does is present this kind of historical narrative of how the Nazis set up these bases in Antarctica. The initial one was in Queen Maudland, and how they basically, from that base, they were able to expand, continuing to develop their programs, and then eventually reach an agreement with the U.S. military-industrial complex that, the group that established itself in Antarctica wasn't interested in having a third world war or continuing the Second World War. What they were interested in was in reaching having negotiations. In fact, many of the people that were involved in that German program in Antarctica, these were the people that had worked with the U.S. military-industrial complex before the Second World War. So they didn't actually support Hitler's war against the U.S. They thought that was madness. But nevertheless, the war happened, and then with the loss of the war, the groups in Antarctica basically resumed their kind of dialogue with the U.S. military-industrial complex. And during the 1950s, agreements were reached. And then once those agreements were reached, then the US secretly began to pour in a lot of resources, a lot of corporate know-how into the German bases in Antarctica, and they expanded them. So they expanded them, had new bases built under the ice, and as far as I know now, there are kind of like 6 major hubs where the US and German programs continue to operate today. Deep under Antarctica. They're not the only bases under the Antarctic ice, but those 6 are the ones that I know continue to exist today, and they basically are just emerging of what the Germans had set up in the 40s and what the US military-industrial complex brought in throughout the 50s and 60s and 70s and up to today.
Thank you. Would you say that what Corey Good refers to as the interplanetary corporate conglomerate is, you talk about a lot of these corporations that help build that. So what have these corporations evolved into? I know that you mentioned ITT and several others that helped start this. Are these now like the Lockheed Martins and the Raytheons and those type of corporations?
Those corporations, those major U.S. Aerospace corporations, they're kind of like primary feeders into the interplanetary corporate conglomerate. But the interplanetary corporate conglomerate is a separate entity. So you have like Lockheed has its Skunk Works and Boeing has its Phantom Works, and so they all have their kind of secret think tanks where they reverse engineer or they build these really advanced technologies. And so these are kind of like feeders into this interplanetary corporate conglomerate, which is kind of like an amalgam of all of these major aerospace companies from Europe, from the United States, places like Australia, and other kind of international partners, Japan, Israel. They all kind of like feed into this interplanetary corporate conglomerate. And its main hubs are now Antarctica and Mars. Mm-hmm. So, between Antarctica and Mars, there's a kind of real close connection because this is where they produce their most advanced technologies. And from there, those are the major hubs. From there, they have kind of like major satellites on the moon, the asteroid belt, some of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, and then outside of our solar system as well. So it really is a major interplanetary corporate conglomerate that grew out of what was originally established in Antarctica, that was kind of like expanded with the help of the U.S. military-industrial complex.
Wow, there's so much to it. Now, you mentioned with the help of Mars. Now, would you say you also touched on Mars? Can you go a little bit more into that? Very interested to find out how that connects to everything.
Sure. Well, as the Germans expanded their base in Antarctica, and then the U.S. military-industrial complex came on board, they were able to then establish a major presence on Mars. That initially, their Mars expeditions in the 40s and early 50s weren't all that successful in establishing a major presence. Just because Mars was a very new environment, and there's indigenous life forms on Mars. And so the Germans basically had to have help. They needed the help of the U.S. military-industrial complex, because that's where the major infrastructure and the resources and the manpower existed for the Germans to be able to really expand their foothold on Mars. And then they needed the help with developing kind of advanced, kind of like fourth generation, fifth generation nuclear weapons, kind of like the neutron bomb, so that they could use them against the Martians. And so this is what happened in the 50s and 60s. And so as a result of that, the interplanetary corporate conglomerate and the Germans were able to establish a foothold on Mars, because the way I understand Mars is that the indigenous life forms there are very territorial. And because the Martian environment is so harsh and inhospitable, there's only certain areas on Mars, kind of like more towards the northern latitudes or the southern latitudes, that really is suitable for bases. And so that territory has already been claimed by indigenous life forms. So this is where the Germans needed help from the U.S. military-industrial complex in basically fighting against the indigenous life forms using these kind of neutron bombs and other kind of advanced weapons to then establish their major presence on Mars. And now they've kind of established a new equilibrium on Mars, where they have all of these bases in northern and southern latitudes, and they've reached a kind of like an equilibrium with the indigenous Martian life forms there, where they kind of leave each other alone. But still, there's kind of conflict there, as I understand it.
Wow, that's very interesting. Thank you. And so going into these, you spoke a little bit about the races on Mars. What races were helping the Nazis? You mentioned the Ariani. Can you briefly tell us about them, and if there was any other races assisting that very beginning of the secret space program with the Nazis?
Sure. At the very beginning, the Nazis began working with the Ariani, which is kind of like an inner Earth group. That's what the Thule Society is very interested in. Their title, Thule, actually comes from the name of the capital of the Hyperborean race, which was Ultima Thule. So that's where they got their name from. And Maria Orsic and her group in the early 1920s began channeling these beings from the inner Earth, and also these beings from Aldebaran, who were kind of like a Nordic-looking race of extraterrestrial. So they were helping Maria Orsic because she had a very kind of like a very new age, very positive philosophy to kind of like help raise consciousness and distribute this kind of advanced technology for the rest of humanity. So that attracted these positive groups. Positive attracts positive. So these positive groups from the inner Earth and Aldebaran began working with Maria Orsic and her group, and so they began to kind of like develop these first flying saucer prototypes in the Weimar Republic in Germany in the 1920s and the early 1930s. But then Hitler's regime came to power in 1933, and like attracts like. Hitler's group attracted the attention of another group of extraterrestrials that were reptilians, and draconian in particular. And so what you had in Germany was what began as a very positive kind of movement of civilians working with these positive extraterrestrial groups slowly came under the power of the Nazi state in the 30s, and the Nazis increasingly negotiated and set up agreements with the draconian reptilians, and so that meant that Ria Osich and her group kind of like lost influence, and the positive inner Earth groups and the older brown groups also began to lose influence in Germany, but the reptilians began to gain more and more influence. And so there was a kind of like tug of war in Germany leading right up to the Second World War as to which group would have more influence. And the kind of German nationalist groups that really believed in Ultima Thule and the kind of like this connection that the Germans had to this Aryan race, they were the ones that kind of went to Antarctica and established the bases there. And they kind of like worked with the Nazis, but they weren't controlled by the Nazis. So the group that established its presence in Antarctica was more this kind of German secret societies that were connected to the Food Society, that worked with these kind of positivity groups like the Ariani, but also the Draconians were involved as well, because they helped them set up the base in Antarctica. So it was very complicated, very mixed, but that's really the history of how it happened and how the Germans ended up in Antarctica, because it was a very mixed, fluid situation with these different ET groups and inner Earth groups all kind of vying for influence over Germany.
Wow, thank you. So I won't pick too much more into that, because I know in the presentation you'll go into it a lot further. But just to get an overview, you also mentioned that the Antarctic ice shelf is being destabilized. And soon enough, we're going to see what's underneath there. Now, how do you think that's going to play out, and how soon do you feel that that's going to be exposed? I mean, nobody can really, give a timeline, but what is underneath there? What can we expect? And how do you feel the reaction will be of the public?
Yeah, well, this is where really, Gaia, the soul of the planet, comes in, because Gaia controls the volcanoes, and it's Gaia that's receiving all of this kind of cosmic energy that's flowing into the sun and coming from the central sun, and it comes into Gaia. And Gaia with the sun kind of determines when certain things are going to be happening, like the solar flash, like the heating up of Antarctica through all these volcanoes that are becoming active. But it seems that this is what we are seeing now, that the volcanoes in Antarctica are becoming active, but it's in the western region of Antarctica. So West Antarctica, the ice shelves down there are basically being melted from below, because this is one of the things that the scientific community has just recently confirmed, is that the Antarctica's volcanic system is concentrated in West Antarctica, and it's the most concentrated system of volcanoes on the planet. Even bigger than East Africa, which previously they thought was the biggest concentration of volcanoes, was East Africa. Now they found out that it's West Antarctica, and it's all under the ice. And then what we're learning from the scientific community now, they're acknowledging that the ice sheets are melting increasingly because these volcanoes under the ice are becoming active. And as they become active, more of the ice sheet melts, so that leads to kind of less weight that's impacting on the volcanoes, and so that allows them to become more active. And so there's a kind of feedback loop, and so this is what we can expect in the in the kind of next 5 years to 10 years is that what's hidden under the ice sheets is going to be exposed, because now all of the ice underneath is melting, and the ice sheets above are also kind of quickly disappearing. So, through the Google satellites and the kind of other satellite systems up there, all of the different governments and civilian organizations are able to see more and more what's under the ice. And as they see more and more, they're seeing more of these kind of ancient artifacts, these cities, these extraterrestrial ruins or crashes. So that's kind of forcing the pace of disclosure. Everyone knows in the secret government and the military that Antarctica is the engine driving disclosure, that you can't get away from this. So this is where kind of like Gaia comes in, because she's driving this.
Very exciting. Thank you so much. And so just to kind of fast forward a little bit, recently there's been some intel drops by Qanon, and your books have been linked to the trip codes, galactic diplomacy and exopolitics. Can you give us a little bit of information on that, what your thoughts are and what you feel the connection is? It's really amazing having your books, linked to that. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Q's trip codes are the way in which Q is able to maintain security when posting on, initially it was on the 4chan, and then it was on the 8chan posting boards. And so Q comes up with these trip codes, and it periodically would replace them. And so, when someone found out that when you entered these trip codes into Google Books, that a particular list of books would come up. And so one of the early trip codes came up with a list of books that dealt with kind of extraterrestrial life, William Cooper's Behold a Pale Horse, my book, Exopolitics, Political Implications of Extraterrestrial Life, and then Galactic Diplomacy, Getting to Yes, that these came up with some of Q's trip codes. So there's that connection there between Q and these kind of exopolitics books. And then more recently, just the last few days actually, Q for the very first time kind of like explicitly addressed the whole question of Roswell, extraterrestrial life, the moon landings and secret space programs, and basically said that, yes, this is real. Yep. And so that was huge, because it meant that because a lot of people, and we're talking millions of people now, that are kind of like conventional conspiracy theorists. I mean, it sounds strange because
I know what you mean.
you have the fringe within the fringe. So exopolitics is the fringe within the fringe. So, for example, like I've never been invited to a Kennedy conspiracy conference because the Kennedy conspiracy theorists themselves as like serious researchers of the Kennedy assassination, and they kind of see people like me who talk about UFOs and extraterrestrial life, and Kennedy was trying to find out what was going on. They kind of see us as kind of lunatic fringe.
Right.
So we didn't get invited. So
conspiracy world, they still see the whole ufology and galactic aspect of it is out there. So having Q confirm that and come out and say it, that's going to open up the doors for a lot of, people like you and others that are doing this type of research to be validated.
Exactly, that's right. Because there's a huge, we're talking millions of people that, are involved in this kind of a whole conspiracy genre. But they look down on the whole UFO extraterrestrial cover-up field and the secret space program. Now, all of a sudden, Q has put us on the map. It said, this is real. Yep. The cover-up is happening, and these secret space programs are real, and extraterrestrials life exists. So I think a lot of the kind of major conspiracy organizations are now going to take a second look at all of this information.
Yeah, they're trying to ease it in. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do is we're going to use their energy and push it through.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Well, I was just thinking how funny it is, because we'll read about the extraterrestrial part of this. I think when people learn that the Nazis are still out there, they're going to blow their minds. Like, people think that we won the war, the Nazis are all gone. and just that fact alone is going to blow most people's mind. Then when you add in the extraterrestrial presence, that's like it's going to be like the trifecta of, oh my God, I can't even believe that's true. You couldn't make all this up if you tried.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And Dr. Salla, how do you feel that kind of translates into now? The Nazis then, what do you feel that whole, faction became now? Is that what we call the deep state, or, the Illuminati or the Freemasons? What do you feel that's morphed into?
Okay, well, the deep state have worked with the kind of Nazi German faction out of Antarctica, but they're different. They're very different. The deep state, these are basically practicing Satanists, right? So they do all of these horrific things that people talk about. But the German kind of secret societies out of Antarctica, I mean, they have a different philosophy, different approach. So basically, what's happened is that they have made deals. They have made deals with with the Trump administration. That's what's happened, and they've made deals, and they've made agreements that they're going to cooperate in releasing their technologies and helping the global transformation. Because they kind of like understand that the deep state has lost, that it's on the way out, and these groups, all of these power groups, they all want to be on the winning side, and they understand that Trump and the white hats within the U.S. military, that they're winning, and so you want to be on the winning side. So the Germans in Antarctica, they've made agreements with the Trump administration, with the kind of white hats within the U.S. military, with the kind of alliance. Corey talks about the Earth Alliance and the Secret Space Program Alliance, and that's very real. So the Germans, they've made deals with the alliance, and they're going to kind of like present themselves in a very positive way. They're going to put a positive spin on what they've done, and that the ones that really did all the evil on the planet are the kind of deep state Satanists associated with the Rothschild family and the kind of Soros group. And interestingly, the Saudi family as well, but the Saudis have cleaned up. They've cleaned up shop. So it's really now the Rothschilds and the Soros that are kind of out there on their own. And so I think that this is what's going to happen, that a lot of people are going to be overwhelmed with an incredible amount of information, but they're going to learn that the German program in Antarctica is not all black, and white as people thought, that there's a lot of shades and greys, and that they've done some good things, and they're going to now share a lot of their technologies and help take us into this kind of like Star Trek type society.
Yeah, well, that's very exciting. Well, thank you very much for everything you discussed. I'm just curious, will you be updating your presentation at all in regards to what's recently been dripped? Are you going to talk about any of that stuff?
Definitely. Well, that was what I was wanting to kind of like get a sense of, was how receptive the audience would be to the kind of Q information, because I'm very encouraged by what Q is revealing. And, I know there's a lot of people that kind of feel very uncomfortable with the whole idea that there can be anything good associated with the Trump administration, and that's and while personally on a policy level, I disagree with a lot of the policies that Trump has done. In terms of when it comes to the deep state and the alliance, I think that he's really a force for good, and so that's something that I'd like to kind of talk about at the conference, because that's something that's going to be very important in terms of understanding what's happening right now.
Yeah, I say go for it. I think the audience will definitely welcome that, and we're excited to hear more about that. So
perfect.
That's awesome. So with that, I'm going to open it up to everyone. If anyone else has any other questions or anything else they'd like to discuss,
I would like to give an update on what took place this afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people know of me and of my work. So here's what took place this afternoon. It was brought to my attention that there was a galactic interference on the global currency reset and the accession process. I was then called into a meeting with my father, which is Source. I had to broadcasts and images of the future of what is going to be taking place. Shortly after that, there was words of a celebration that will be heading our way, and that they're slowly finding out that we are not to be fooled with down here. We'll get into further discussions on that later on down the line, but that's what took place this afternoon. So expect a lot of changes. We'll now be moving into hyperdrive.
Well, thank you for that. There is a lot going on that we might not necessarily witness here in 3D, but there is a battle going on for the liberation and ascension of humanity. So, it's all very exciting. And what you're doing, what Dr. Salla is doing, it's all on the cutting edge, because you're exposing things and you're introducing people to something that's going to be very needed soon. Because although now it might seem fringe, this is going to, blow open very soon. And a lot of people are going to need this information. So
I'm curious as to how much will be revealed to people, whether all the takedowns of the, let's call them the famous or the influential dark people, if you will, if we'll witness that, or if it will be kept quiet, like how much will people know? And
that was also brought up in the meeting, and I stressed that, once the people get the full truth, there will be a little shockness. People are not fully understanding. But that's why there's people like us that are ready to help them along the way. So that's one of the things that were brought up. I had to show them that we were all ready, basically, because they thought we wasn't. So one of the things that I stressed, that Source put me here for a reason, to make these changes happen, what I'm doing every day. Some of you already know that. And pretty much their time was up, and what we wanted was granted. So that's why I say, expect the celestial ceremony. Period.
Awesome.
I think it'll be a kind of very, I know that, the Alliance has decided to kind of roll it out in a graduated way, but I think that graduated rollout is going to be accelerated, that they do have a plan to, first introduce people to the idea that extraterrestrial life exists, and that that the Germans continued after the Second World War, and gradually roll out everything. But I think that with the whole kind of melting of the Antarctic ice caps, and because I think ultimately it's we have to get ready as a planet, because the pole shift is a possibility. That there can be a pole shift, there can be some major catastrophic events, and so we as a planet need to get ready. We need to share all the information that's available and help people to get out of the way, to protect people. And some people might have to go off planet. There might be millions of people that have to go off planet for protection for a short period while all of these earth changes play out. So, so I think that's going to be something that, will come out. I think that, it'll roll out in a kind of logical way, but accelerated. So I think that essentially, people are going to have to, ride the wave, and it's going to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I've got the same thing you got, 5 years. So we're definitely accelerating all of this. I'll share more about myself with you in person, and then you'll see where I'm coming from. I'm dead serious about my work.
Look forward to it.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think one of the most important things that we can give to the audience is there's going to be a lot of galactic history that, Dr. Salla has been documenting, and others like you, and what you're doing is very important. And this is going to be a reference point that people are going to need, because all of this has been hidden amongst everything else that, you've shown us with the secret space program. So we so very much appreciate everything that you're doing, and we're so looking forward to seeing you next weekend at the Empowered Light Expo. It's so exciting that you're going to be in this area because I know you don't come here a lot. So we're so very grateful and thank you for that, Dr. Salla. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I want to say I'm actually going to be on Coast to Coast radio on Monday night. So I'm going to basically tell everyone that I'm going to be at the expo and they can come and see me and hear all of these presentations. That these expos are really going to be very, very important. That them to be there and kind of embrace and be open to the information, embrace them, because that's going to be how people get red pilled. You've got to be open. You've got to go to these events and support them. So I'll definitely let the Coast audience know about the expo.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for being here, and have a wonderful rest of your day. We so appreciate this.
Thank
Love you guys. Love you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.